Fighting Eyes is a 3D fighting game that was released for the PlayStation in 1998, but can only be found in Japan. So for many, very few people would even know that this game was even a reality back then. And what this game tries to do is it tries to go back to the early days of iconic 3D arcade fighters, arena fighters. So when you look at the likes of earlier fighting games with Fighting Vipers on the Sega Saturn, you had the likes of Virtua Fighter, you also had the likes of Soul Blade and a few other games in its category that tried to utilise many of these aspects. This game tries to replicate that in many ways, and you can notice it from the visual style. It is very fast paced and frantic in what it tries to do, and it definitely does have that arcade aesthetic, which is a nice touch, and it gives you access to a variety of different modes, from practice modes to test your skills and to understand the gameplay mechanics. But you also do have a versus mode so that you can play against your mates. But then you do have the campaign mode where you can test out your skills against the computer by being given access to a multitude of different characters. Each have their own unique quirks, traits, abilities. They have their own visual preferences. Some can definitely be over the top and in many cases quite laughable. Like if you look at this guy here on the screen, who does he remind you of? And it's not even from a fighting game. If you played Resident Evil 4 or even the modern remake, you would understand. It's hardly just a coincidence, let's just put it that way. But still, it's pretty cool in what it tries to do. It just tries to go back to a simpler time of fighting games, as with 1998, like 1998 was a very important year for video games. You've seen a massive transition in terms of the level of quality with games being developed, not just with fighting games in general, but across the board in all different genres. But what this game tries to do is it tries to stick to that original aesthetic that would have dated back from likes of the early days of the PlayStation and Sega Saturn, from like 1994 all the way to 1996 and so forth, because the majority of games coming out during that time, especially with combat or fighting games like this, all tried to look and feel and even play very similar. So this will appeal to fans of that type of aesthetic with regards to this category of games. But how does it feel like to play? Well, funny enough, starting off, it is very fast paced. It can be a little bit unusual to try and figure out the movesets, but as with any fighting game, it doesn't take long to figure out what to do. But when you get familiar with the character's traits and abilities, you will be able to master the many movesets they have available. And you have your typical punches and kicks, combos. You also have various special moves and even grapple abilities that you can do, like suplexes or even like wrestling moves in many cases. So you do have all of those abilities to hand. And in many cases that I found personally, that it is simpler to pick up and play compared to a lot of other fighters that I have played over the years. So it's quite enjoyable just in that respect. But there's definitely enough here to warrant quite a few playthroughs. Like the graphics overall, like I said, it's going back to try and capitalise on earlier type games, so the graphics aren't overly detailed. Yes, they do look nice for what they represent, but this is just trying to be an old school purebred arcade fighter, and it does do it quite well. It does do it justice. Like I said, if you are a fan of the likes of earlier Virtua Fighter games, this here will be a good alternative. It has all of those traits and characteristics that you would enjoy, and you will really be able to hone your own skill levels and challenge yourself and even challenge your mates. So you definitely will have a blast here with a group, and each of the environments and arenas all have their own distinct visual style, which is a pretty cool feature as well. But that's the one thing I found really cool. It's just the simplicity of the whole experience. It wasn't trying to be something that it's not. It's not trying to compare with the likes of the Tekken series or the more heavy hitters on the system. It's just trying to be something that relates back to one of the earlier and probably one of the best periods of arcade fighting games. And it, like I said, it does do it justice. It makes a really good attempt at it, and it is a very good alternative to many of those games out there. Now the fights themselves, once you get into it, they don't be long lasting. Once you understand all of the special moves and abilities, you can overcome your opponents quite quickly. Now in saying that, it does get challenging later on, and especially if you increase the difficulty, it can get very hectic very quickly. But if you want to understand all of the characters' backgrounds, you will need to play through the campaign progressively to understand all of their story elements, to unlock all of the endings and even unlock many of the game's hidden features. So that in itself is a reason to keep playing. Overall, it's just a fun game. I had a blast playing it. I would definitely go back to it, and I would recommend people people play it, just for the simplicity of it. But again, just to go back to a more simple era of games to play as they were intended to play. So if it's something you would be interested in, go for it, give it a go and see what you think for yourself. And I would love to know your thoughts of this game if you have played it yourself, and what do you think of it, or did you know that this game even exists? Are you even a fan of these type of old school arcade fighters, like similar to Virtua Fighter and the like? And if so, what do you think of them overall? Would they be your preferred way to play fighting games, or would you prefer the more mainstream games with the likes of Tekken that are more intricate and more detailed? It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to be updated of future videos. And if you would like to see more content around other types of unique and quirky style arcade fighting games that are also released on the PlayStation, then you can check out this playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.